Hello everybody. If you've never been here before, welcome to Sector67. We do these monthly meetings. It's basically a show and tell. People can talk about projects they worked on and things that they've built. Today, I believe we have three presentations total, and Devin is going to lead things off. Talking talking about fishing, which should be pretty fun. That's it. So at the very end of the meeting, we'll go run around. You can say who you are, what you're interested in, and why you're here, or whatnot. So without further ado, take it away, Mr. Devin.
Thanks. Maybe could you get these lights here, maybe?
Yeah, just kill the front and the back, the far left here. Yep, there you go.
Yeah, thanks very much. I ran into this idea just sort of randomly, just with a video that got around on the internet about a traditional fishing method or style, traditional Korean fishing style known as Gyeonji, and will come up here. The way that Gyeonji fishing works is that the angler uses a really it's a short rod that has, you can see is right there, that has a winder around the tip of the rod. So instead of a reel holding the line is just wound around this flat winder on the end of the rod, and it's in Korea they have all these mountain streams, rivers, and this fishing style is really well suited to that kind of environment. And the angler will just stand out in the current and use the Gyeonji rod to drift a rig with a hook and bait downstream. And that's how it's presented to the fish. So I ran this video and I thought it just looked really neat, really kind of a neat, kind of minimalist kind of way to fish, to enjoy being outside too. Started to wonder about how I could build one of those rods. And you can't really buy those anywhere here. And if I could maybe think of variations, some sort of other kind of spin for it. And I came up with this design, which is a similar kind of configuration, I guess, but the traditional Korean rods it's sort of like a fly swatter. There are two vanes that stick out at the end of the rod, and that's what the line is wound around. My design has three vanes, and these are laser cut pieces of plastic, and then there are notched spacers that hold it around the tip of the rod. And I'll pass a couple of these around so you can see. And one thing that I discovered right away was that with the first prototypes that I made was that this design actually, whereas the Korean rods are basically just for drifting downstream in a river or creek, this design with the three winder vanes actually allows for a cast with a weighted rig. I'll show how that goes quick. The line just, when you cast, the line just peels off the winder. This style of rod, it isn't really for casting lures for artificials over and over again, because it takes a little bit to set up each cast. To start the cast, I have to stack up the last few feet of line carefully in the front of the winder. And by doing that, the first few feet of line will peel off the winder, and then the loops of line enlarge, and then it can take more line with it. And if I balance the weight right, and I'm careful, I can cast to as far as 30 yards with this rod. And I'll just show how a cast goes here real quick. And with more space, bigger wind up, I can cast a good deal farther than that. So the Gyeonji rod is just really neat, kind of as a way to, both the traditional Korean ones, and I think what I'm working on, just a way to kind of enjoy the fishing experience with with gear and tackle that's sort of just condensed down to the most basic, the most minimalist kind of thing that you need. A more, the conventional, most popular kind of fishing gear tackle that people use here is a spinning rod and reel. And these work great, but this is, you know, this little simple spinning reel probably has 100 different parts in it. You know, gears, springs, other mechanisms. But the Gyeonji rod, on the other hand, is just, you know, no moving parts, just a single piece basically. So I can have a couple minutes left, but I'll show the some action. This is Tenny Park fishing for carp, and people have asked me, you know, what's the point? What's the advantage of the Gyeonji rod? And one thing I would say is that it, you know, for certain situations it works great, and it's really practical, really simple, kind of no hassle fishing gear. Really durable too. I've stepped right on these a couple clumsily stepped on them a couple times, and it's this tough fiberglass rod, and it's really tough, durable. But another thing that the main thing I enjoy about fishing with them is that the connection with the fish, especially something that fights really hard, is much more direct. Whereas a spinning reel, you know, if I hook a big fish on the spinning reel, the mechanical drag will spin and keep the fish from breaking the line. But with the Gyeonji rod, it's much more hands-on. And here's the video with showing a fight with a pretty good carp. This is that steel ridge, Tenny Park, that goes over the lagoon. And I hooked into a pretty good carp right there. And with a big fish that's pulling really hard, fighting really hard, what I do is just let the rod spin. So that was a strong carp that was pulling really hard on the line, and to control that, I just let it spin. And then, you know, as the fish starts to tire out, start reeling, winding in again. Get one more clip here, quick. Another really hard fighting fish. This is a bowfin, Winger Creek, where Mills goes over that ridge. There's a little hole right below that ridge. Bowfin are really great. They're like sea monsters. They fight ounce for ounce. They fight harder than any other fish that we have around here. Their mouth are all full of teeth. They're really cool fish to catch. So yeah, that's the general idea. I've also, in addition to rods, it's been really helpful to have access to the, thanks Chris and Sector, the laser cutter, because working on this I've refined the design of the winder and the rest of the rod too, and it's really helpful to be able to go to the laser cutter for redesign, refinements, to get the best designs. So yeah, any questions?
People have been watching you. What kind of feedback do you get?
Well, it varies from interest to dismissal, I guess. Like why would you want to use something that makes it more difficult, I guess, or more challenging? I guess I would just say that it's just again just kind of a way to condense the fishing experience down to the basics. And it's, like I said, also it's especially fun, dramatic, scary almost when looking at something big, just with a real low-tech approach like this.
What do you use? Is this heat shrink?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
That grabs onto the shaft.
Yep. Yeah. It's heat shrink, and there's a couple layers of fabric tape underneath.
Okay.
That adhere with the adhesive.
Sure.
And also protect the blank a little bit from the heating. That has to be heated up really carefully to protect the fiberglass blank. Make damage.
Okay. Thank you.
What made you choose to shoot 3 pin instead of patient 2?
Well, I was just trying to imagine how to make something like that. The traditional Korean rods, it's pretty. There are some videos you can find online and it's pretty complicated. Like they have a fiberglass blank. The Gyeonji fishing has been around for hundreds of years, but the contemporary traditional Korean rods, you know, the fiberglass blank, and then the rod builder has a jig, a drill press, and he'll feed the blank in there, and the drill press will drill a tiny little hole, and then the winders, I don't know if you saw it, had like a, what do you say, a helical shape, a helix. So every hole is offset slightly from the previous hole, and it looks nice and it works well, but it's kind of a complicated construction, and I imagine this being easier and more durable as well.
Any other questions? So you're just to be clear, you're hand building the whole thing basically from raw parts.
Yeah. Yes. The fiberglass blank are blanks sold as ice fishing rod blanks, and then there's a foam handle. I also have some that have a cork handle. Some designs that have a cork handle. A couple other parts like the winding check, and then yeah, the winder vanes or winder parts are laser cut plastic panel. This material. It took me a while to figure this out. If you're building things with laser cut parts, you know, acrylic has limitations. It's very brittle, especially when you laser cut it. You can't laser cut PVC plastic panel. This is acetyl resin, Delrin, and it laser cuts real nice, and it's a real tough plastic that you can use for this kind of part. Just laser cuts real easy.
Thank you, Devin.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tom. I built a magnetic knife block. I'll hold this up so you can see it better. I swapped out my nice knives for these better knives so I didn't hurt myself or the knives presented here, but it does hold, you know, much more substantial knives than these here. So this was the inspiration. So I moved to Madison in August and I was looking for kitchen things. I saw this knife block and thought that looked really nice. It's really, really expensive. I don't want to pay that much money for this. I might as well make it myself. This really can't be that hard to get. Yeah. So the first step I took was eyeballing the dimensions of like, okay, this knife looks like it's 8 inches tall, so that means this piece is 10 inches tall, and then mocking it up in Onshape, which is an online CAD editor. And so making the first couple pieces went really smoothly. One piece at a time. I figured out how to drill holes into the piece and do the bevels and everything like that. And then I was ready to like assemble it in Onshape, and that's when I ran into problems. Geometry is really hard. So if you have a 6-sided vertical, a vertical shape, it's really easy because it's 360 degrees. You have 6 sides, so each angle it has to be a 30-degree cut on each side of the piece. And for this top part here, it's pretty close to 30 degrees, but the bottom is nowhere close to that. Because they splay out, if you imagine you have the 6 sides like this, eventually as you hit like totally flat, the angle is nowhere near that. It's completely different. And so in between there's a lot of really difficult trigonometry. Luckily I didn't have to do that. There's a guy on YouTube, Matthias Wandel, and he does some crazy woodworking things, like building his own bandsaw and other things like that. But he happened to have a video building half of what I wanted. And I'm like, okay, if I can do this once, he built the bottom, and I can build the bottom twice and then stick it upside down. And he had this really helpful miter cut table that he did in Excel. And so you pick the number of sides, so I had 6 sides, and And I knew what my splay was, and so you just go and it tells you what the two angles you need to specify on the table saw are. And once I plugged that into my CAD editor, within the precisions of my model, it was just what I needed. I no longer had the sides that went through each other. So then I did a rough prototype with some pine just to make sure that it was possible to do this on the table saw without like buying a fancy like angle measure thing. And it worked pretty well. It closed up, so that's what I was looking for. And so all of this wood here was stuff from the scrap bin that Mike brought. So this is Sapel. I had to do a bunch of milling to get the wood to this shape. It started as a fairly checked and split, unfinished board, and I had to mill it down and resaw it and all different things like that. But eventually I got it to look pretty, and I was able to glue it up. And then I used this nifty jig here to be able to cut the parts. And because it's this compound miter cut, you have to both set the table saw angle and also the miter jig. The miter jig was really much more accurate than I thought it would be. I eyeballed 25.6 degrees and it came out to be pretty close to what I needed. But the way it works is you run the wood through and you flip it over like that, and so that way the angles meet like that, and then like that, and then that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and all of your parts come out exactly the same is the idea. Now you can use a stop block. If you were doing this on like the miter saw, which you could do, these compound angles, it's more difficult to do the stop block than on the table saw. So the first dry fit went really well. Blue tape was really important to this project. It features heavily in this picture. But all the angles closed up, and that was really exciting because when you're cutting these really severe angles, especially for the bottom, like there's no way this is actually going to close up. And when it finally does, it was very satisfying. So watching the video, Matthias had this very complicated gluing jig where he took offcuts that had the same angle and clamped it to the pieces, and you end up with this parallel gluing surface, and so you can apply clamping pressure that goes straight through the center of the joint to get the strongest possible joint, and then everything works out really nicely. It's just about impossible to do, even with two people. It's really hard. The glue makes everything very slippery. The clamps are heavy. It turns out that the glue sets up quick enough that I just taped two pieces together and then kind of held it with my hands until it felt firm, and that actually worked. So again, glue tape to the rescue. So the magnets, this is the part that took the longest because I had to learn how to use the CNC wood router. In order to get the magnet to be strong enough to hold the knives that I had in mind, I needed a thickness of the wood that was smaller than the point on a Forstner bit. So on a Forstner bit, there's a little guide point, and if I had used that, which you normally would do to cut holes like this, it would have poked through the good face of the piece, and I didn't want that. So it was sort of overkill to use the CNC machine to cut two circular holes on a piece of wood, but it did what I needed, and I just epoxied the magnets in. This here is actually the pieces on the edge are drying right there. There really wasn't a need for clamping pressure here. There's tape on the backside of the joint to hold it for 2 minutes, and the glue I was using, I think it's the Gorilla Glue Tight Bond 4 equivalent. It sets up really quickly, worked very nicely. And then finishing, I just used cutting board mineral oil. It looks really cool in the right light. And there it is in my kitchen with a real knife. There's a salt and pepper shaker stand in the middle of it, and you can put like utensils like spatulas and spoons in there. So any questions?
What was the name of the gentleman again?
Matthias Wandel, yeah. But yeah, he has a great YouTube channel. It's definitely a rabbit hole of interesting things. Everything from building your own bandsaw to how to build the most lethal mouse trap. So yeah.
So how thin did you end up making it? Between the magnet and the circuit?
So I aimed for an 1/8 inch. So I had 8 of these pieces because I figured I might screw one of them up and it'd be good to have a backup. And I used that to try and cut plugs for it, and I realized that it was actually probably closer to a 1/16 of an inch, and I did something wrong with the CNC machine. I didn't cut through it though. I didn't touch your precious table. But it holds the knives just fine. So I did do some, Amazon doesn't have the best like saying exactly what the magnets you're buying are and like which neodymium version they are. But there was a calculator I consulted that approximately told you how much weight a magnet could support for how far away from the metal it was. That's what I loosely based it on. But the prototype is really what I just for that one I could poke through, so I just tested it with a drill until I got it to stick. Yeah.
So did you discover you had any stainless steel knives?
No, I did not. that would have been unfortunate. I did discover though in the glue up stage I made a classical woodworking error, and all of the pieces were aligned the same way. I did not flip the middle piece so that the grain was going like that, which turned out to be a problem because, as I said, I flipped the cut every time, and so half of my pieces were cupped like this, half of them were cupped like that, and so there was a lot of creative sanding to get all the edges to be flush.
Any other questions? Next time. Anybody else got anything to present? I think there's something else. Jim? Got something to present?
No.
Oh. Yes. Alright. So, for anybody that doesn't know, we are moving in approximately 24-ish days. It'll be lots of fun. We have, this will be great, the network's got a lot of the images. We have begun moving some stuff, so you'll start to see some things that are missing from here. And we're in the process then of kind of getting the things that are necessary for occupancy. So what occupancy means is from the city's perspective, what things need to be in place to have a building which is rated to occupy, meaning people can be there that aren't construction workers. So right now there's like a porta potty outside, which works great for construction, doesn't work so good for general use, things like that. Lights, other things. Mainly they're concerned with fire hazards, so they want to make sure that like the doors work and you can get outside of the building in more than one place, which is an improvement that we've made recently. And that there's exit signs, stuff like that. So for those of you that don't remember, this is what the building originally looked like. This was about a year and 2 months ago when I was in, and this was the construction company still there. It's actually pretty funny because they were taking down the old fluorescent lighting and replacing it with LED lights like a month before the building got sold. So it worked well for us, not so good for them. Sorry, crew. But they had a mezzanine built in, and basically it was a functional-ish building, but it didn't have a full installation system, and it was only a tiny bit bigger than what here was. So of course the very first thing we did is rip it all apart, which many of you have had some fun partaking in. This is the southwest corner of the building when we had the lower floors knocked out and the upper floor added on. So what we ended up doing was adding on a second story by adding 10 feet to it. This is the front corner as we started to build this out. This part here is where we now have an entryway, and that entryway came from Chase Bank in Monona. So almost all the parts for the building, aside from the plywood and the insulation, are all from other buildings. So we've gathered windows from other buildings, entryway, doors, all kinds of stuff. Pretty much anything we can get that's not raw building materials that come from other places. Thanks, Mark, for lots of insulation in the back of the truck. We had, Mark walked out at the perfect time. Good, I can embarrass him. Oh, there he is over there. We needed to move the insulation, so we had fun trying to figure out exactly how many giant bales of insulation we can fit in this truck at once. So kind of the news to report on was this past week I was up at 5:30 in the morning for 5 days straight, so I had a lot of fun, and up till typically later at night than that. So this was Spindorf starting to pour the floor. It's hard to see up there. I don't know if you want to kill all the lights, Jim. You can kill the LEDs for a second. See if that helps. Yeah, a little bit. So this was at like 7:30 in the morning. So their concrete was supposed to show up at 7. They got here at 6. Prepped the floors and got everything going. Basically, I'm going to show you a video that was a time lapse that Brian took from a GoPro that shows you enough detail to understand how they actually poured the floor. It's really fun to watch how they addressed 7,500 square foot floor in small sections so that they were able to pour and level it as they went. So essentially they rough poured it out and screed it, which means that they level the concrete and kind of try to get all the aggregate pushed down all the stones in it. And then they worked their way towards the door. So they kind of made a big S shape in order to get out of the door while not putting their foot in the last bit of concrete, which is an important step if you want to floor this and have footprints all over in it. And then they work around all the columns, all the drain lines and sewer and water and things that would run up, and anything else that was in the way. And then what actually took the longest, which was not something that I thought would take the longest, because they were basically done by about 12:30. So they started at about 7:30, were done by 12:30, and then they were around until 9 o'clock at night. And what they were doing was finishing. So this machine that he's riding on that looks like a hovercraft has two, they're like just propellers with real flat paddles, they're trowels. And essentially, he's got two sticks, and the two sticks control the rotation rate. And if he pulls the stick one way, it'll spin that direction and vice versa. And they just sat and rode him around. So they would drive all over the place to get most of the floor, and they had smaller finishers, which you can't quite see, but this gentleman in the back is using it along the walls and around all the columns to avoid running the machine into all this stuff, because the thing weighs a couple thousand pounds, and if you hit the wall, you'll knock the wall out, which would be bad. So they spent probably the better part of about 5 hours waiting for the concrete to cure, and then continuing to run this thing and adjusting the pressure lower and lower and lower to try and polish the concrete as they work their way out. So as the night wore on, actually this is the next morning, the night wore on about 9 o'clock, they started trying to saw cut the floor for the control joints. But they didn't have their equipment running, and they didn't want to roll around their huge vacuum cleaner that sucks up all the concrete dust. So they gave up and came back the next day. Of course, asking me if I want to get there at 6:30 on Saturday. I told them 7. That was my compromise. So they got a late start on Saturday as a result of me not getting there at 6:30. And they finished up about noonish on Saturday to try and get it done. So they helped us a lot. This was Findorf, they're basically doing it at cost. It's about $30,000 to pour the floor, but we now have a really, really, really flat floor. So let me pull up the time-lapse video real quick, and we'll talk about some other stuff. Of course, the beginning of the time-lapse is always me with my head in the camera. So this is just clearing out the remaining stuff. So these are concrete buggies over up to the right, and that's the entryway at the right side, so that's looking east. So what they're doing right now is they're pouring the western side, so you can see them. They started over here, and now they're going to work their way across this way. And what you'll see, if we can catch it, is they have a couple of tools that they're using. So this guy here is a power screed. So you'll see the concrete on this side looks really rough, and the concrete on this side looks really smooth. And what they're doing is this is like a weed whacker, and it's shaking a weight on a 20-foot long aluminum bar that's shaped like a triangle. And it's shaking the triangle and allowing it to knock the aggregate down. So you got 3/4 inch rock that's suspended in this slurry of concrete or cement, and they're trying to push the rock down a little bit, but if they push the rock down too far, then the cement floats up to the top and you get like an inch worth of cement, which is really brittle. So they're trying to balance the amount that they knock the aggregate down. And what they do then is, so they got this 20-foot long bar, this vibratory screed, and they need to run it on something in order to level the concrete. So what was really fun is they had a laser on a stick, which Mark will love. They were still using the damn stick. And basically what they would do is they'd come over here, and the guy would start here, and he would hand finish one little spot. So he'd finish a spot like this big around with the hand trowel. And he'd put the laser on it and finish it, put the laser on it and finish it, and then he would draw an X on it. And the X was to tell them whether they had cut too deep while they were doing the next step. So the next step then is he goes down here to this corner, and he'll do another blob of concrete, and he'll finish that. And then they'll have two guys with about a 15-foot long aluminum extrusion, and they'll screed between those 2 points. So the guy with the laser sets a point here and a point here. They take a bar and they go across the 2 points and level the concrete in just that little area. So they make like a 2-foot wide, very flat section. And the little X that he draws on the top is to make sure that the two people that are screeding along it don't cut too deep, because then they lose their level again with the laser reference. Then they come over to this opposite corner and they'll do a pad here and a pad here, and then they'll do a line. So now they have 2 lines, and then with 2 lines they can draw the power screed across it. And then there's 2 people right here behind the person running that power screed that are raking concrete into the power screed so that it has too much material, so it's always too much material behind it. So it's always pulling across and leveling as it goes. So essentially they would do a point to point, a line, point to point, a line, and then they'd pull a line across it. And then as they withdrew this, they would have a perfectly flat level area of concrete. And they just did that about 15 feet at a time the whole way around. They just work around in circles. Then they had concrete buggies continuously running loops, so that's what's back here. Moving about 2 yards of concrete in a go, and they dump it, and then the guys raking would rake it out, and they just keep repeating the same process over and over and over. So fundamentally, it's not that difficult, but of course, as you watch them, it's like watching, you know, really highly trained dancers who all have their own job, doing exactly what they need to do, almost not killing each other. There was one time the guy with the buggy dumped the concrete a lot too close to the guy standing in the middle of the concrete puddle and knocked him over. He only put one hand down though. He had real good balance real fast. So that resulted in a little bit of shouting. Other than that, everything was pretty smooth the whole day. So if you get a chance, this YouTube video is online. I think Brian emailed it out. But you can watch, you can kind of watch that process in the video. This was a different perspective. We had a couple different, actually it's the same one. We had a couple different cameras running. At one point they knocked the power out to part of the building just by unplugging an extension cord basically. And so that camera cut off a little bit early, but you get the idea anyways in watching it. So in short, we now have a building that's enclosed and we have a concrete floor. The floor is still drying. So essentially that same day you could walk on it. And so the next day we went and put up drywall around most of the building. But we're still waiting for it to set up enough that we can drive the heavier equipment across it. So we haven't driven the forklift on it or the Bobcat or anything else. They did move the scissor lift back inside, but put it on top of pallets so it would spread out the weight so we don't end up with a bunch of dents in the concrete. Hi, Aaron. So in short, we're making good progress. The landlord here in this building has said that we have until April 1st to move all of our stuff out so they can start doing asbestos abatement. There is not supposed to be any asbestos here, but of course they don't test until the building's completely cleared out. So essentially they want to check the tile that's in the machine shop and then a whole bunch of stuff in the art studios. So who knows whether there's anything actually here. I think it's fairly unlikely given the construction timing of this building, but at any rate, they start that process April 1st. But by the end of the month, I'm sure they'll have an updated timeline on when they're actually going to do what they're going to do. But we've been slowly moving things over there since we have a floor now. I can move equipment over and materials and other things, so you'll start to see stuff disappearing from here. Hopefully I don't move something that you needed. If I did, it's over there someplace. But we're basically in the process then of shuttling materials over, and then we'll start moving equipment coming up towards the end of this week. So we'll start moving the non-essential things and things that have duplicates of. The shop here will continue to exist up until it doesn't because we have everything set up there. The only shop that'll be harder and we'll probably move it in about a day is the wood shop because I don't have duplicates of all those tools. But like the machine shop, I have lots of mills, I have lots of lathes. Welding shop, we have 1 million welders, way more than we need. There's already welders over there and there are plenty of them here. So we're just going to try to move things in sort of in tiers and then eventually we'll switch the shop over that way. The next big milestones are, like I was saying earlier, we need to achieve occupancy. So what that means is we need to have exit doors set up with exit lights above them, so egress lighting. We need to have a bathroom. That's the next step that we're hoping to build this weekend is to get the walls put up and start to figure out the plumbing for that. We need to have the insulation system completed, so the city won't give you occupancy unless your insulation system is continuous, which means that we need to finish putting up drywall and blowing in insulation on the remaining walls. I think we've got 9 out of 22 walls done, so we're almost halfway there. It sounds like Sean and I are going to work tomorrow, and whoever else wants to come and help on blowing in the insulation on the rest of those, on the walls that we do have completed. And then at any point, we can continue to drywall. My dad's been finishing up the electrical kind of as he goes, so I think we have 3 or 4 more walls that we can drywall as of today, so we can continue to work on that. And then the big one will be on the western wall. We're within 10 feet of the adjacent property line, so that's a firewall, which just means that you have a 1-hour fire rating, meaning that if there's a fire on adjacent property or on our property, the next door neighbor has an hour to figure out how to not make their building burn down, or more specifically, the fire department has an hour to show up and start to put the fire out. That's just standard commercial code, and it's just how it goes. The problem is that we have to have that wall built completely up, so we can't ignore the second floor like we can do everywhere else in the building. So we have to get the whole wall, all 24 feet, actually closer to 30 feet straight up, done. So that's the other thing we did. Bob helped a bunch this weekend with studding out the upper section of the wall, and then Eric and Isaac finished it. So the studs are all up on the inside. We have to stud the outside and then put up more sheet products and stuff up there and kind of go from there. So in short, we need to finish the western wall completely, blow in insulation and drywall on all the inside walls, and then get a bathroom built, and then legally we can start to work from there, in the sense that we can start to move things over and there's no problem occupancy-wise. And then the next two things we have to build is a wall around the welding shop and the wood shop, hopefully for obvious reasons. Those are both noisy and dusty. And then the rest of the things we'll kind of figure out as we go and sort out where we want to put up walls and what uses need to be delineated and how we want to kind of lay out equipment and stuff like that. The good thing is this building, just one floor of it is 9,600 square feet. The building that we're in now is about 8,000 square feet, so we have more space in this place just on one floor. But since we have two floors, we have a lot more space. It's just that we can use one floor for now, and then we'll build into the second floor kind of as we go. Things we're waiting on that we don't have any control over, we need to figure out the electrical service. So MG&E needs to improve the electrical service. Their foundation has provided the service improvement for free. It's about $50,000 to run electric lines from Milwaukee Street underground down our Quarry Street to our lot, and then across our lot, and then they're going to dig diagonally from where the transformer goes to the edge of our building where we'll put in the service. That'll be 1,200 amps at 3-phase power. The service is a little bit bigger than we had needed because we got some free equipment that saved us about $10,000 in buying it, but it means that we have to put in a bigger service than we wanted, which is fine. It just means we have more capacity for the future. So we have to wait on them. That'll probably be 2 to 3 weeks from whenever they get started. So hopefully right towards the end of April, or towards the beginning of April, we'll have the service all done. And then the other thing that we haven't talked about, right now we have 2 small heaters running, and they're enough to heat the whole building. In fact, it seemed to be making it too hot for everyone. So we might got the heat back. But at any rate, thermostat's overrated. At any rate, since we're the capitalist pigs now, you know, the landlord industrialists, we have to just burn as much money as we can. At any rate, we have to put in an actual heater and air conditioner at some point. General Heating and Cooling is doing the design work for free and is going to submit for a permit for us. We have to hang off the unit and run the ductwork. It'll be very similar to what's hanging above me. This is spiral-wound ductwork. We got the ductwork already, much complaining as it's been rolling around all over the place. But we already have it. It's free, which is good. We're going to use it. They're going to size all the ducting, or they're going to size all the runs to be appropriate for the ductwork that we already have. So we shouldn't really have to buy very much aside from some fittings for it. Most of the lines are straight runs, which will be easy enough. But literally, we just have to get the unit up, and then it'll provide enough hot and cold air to get distributed around. We shouldn't have to do a lot that way-wise, but we do have to get that step sorted out to make the city happy. So the city needs a permit for plumbing, for heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and for the building itself, which is something that Adam and I will be working on tomorrow to get the rest of that sorted out. Ironically, of all things you'd think would have to have someone who's a trades profession doing it, running gas lines, they just kind of pass that back and forth between the plumber and the HVAC people. One of them draws straws and they have to do it. So there's no licensure for it. Like a plumber has to be licensed as a plumber, but nothing for gas lines. So who knows? That's something I didn't expect. But yeah, there's no gas line guy who comes and runs all the gas lines for you. In short, like I said, the goal is to kind of flow into that space without interfering or interrupting much of what everyone's doing. Meaning that we're going to move all of the things that don't get used very much over there, get that stuff put in some place that's out of the way, and then build walls in, kind of work through that, get the utilities and stuff settled. Most importantly, work on the things that the city requires, so that we have a building that's not just for construction people, but can actually be used in general, and then kind of ease into that as we go. And then wait for updates from the landlord on what to do with this space and kind of what that process looks like. But we've been making good progress moving. We have the giant truck and the trailer, so that helps a lot. At some point, we'll probably hire a tow truck, so you can just basically buy a tow truck for the day by hiring the driver, and just have them drive back and forth to move most of the bigger equipment that's easier to haul on a flatbed or flatback like that. So it'll be fun and interesting. The good news is we moved everything here, so we know how to move all of it. It's not hard to do. It just takes time and coordination, so we don't tip anything over. Anybody have any questions? Jim?
Well, just I guess the scheduling thing, the next monthly meeting will be at the new building.
Next monthly meeting has to be at the new building.
Just so people don't go to the wrong building, there'll be a hole in the ground.
Just along those same lines.
Yeah.
What's the projected time when these shops here are no longer usable? and the projected time when the new shops will be up and running.
Yeah, the biggest thing, so I'm going back and forth with MG&E to schedule the service improvement over there. Because right now, we have power over there and we can run whatever, just running off a really long extension cord. We have a 220 extension cord and we have 120 extension cords and all works fine. But until I know for sure what MG&E is doing, if they can get it scheduled in 2 weeks to have their guys dig a trench and get a transformer set up and we can set our end of the service up, that means potentially in 2 weeks we'd have enough power there to be able to run any equipment that we want to. Because my dad's already done the electrical, it's in the walls, it just literally has to get covers put on it and the outlets actually themselves installed. So in short, I don't have a solid answer because it's sort of out of our hands on scheduling. But really the only contingent there is to get the power sorted out. Once we have the power sorted out, any of the equipment can run and function, then it's just a matter of moving it, positioning it in a place so we can get to it. But like I said, the goal will be to leave stuff set up here until it's working there and then shift stuff over that way. And I'm sure everybody
So 2 or 3 more weeks here.
Yeah, at least.
And then,
Yeah, basically the goal is that by the end of the month, obviously everything's shuffled over there. And then the other thing too is we can certainly work with the landlord on what rooms really need to be cleared out and which ones don't. Because obviously if there's no need for abatement in this main space, we could just move everything in here and slowly shuffle over there. But really, and I'll say this, and I'm sure I'll get some snickers, but space is not the problem there. It's just coordination of moving the equipment there and moving the stuff there. We have plenty of room upstairs, there's plenty of room downstairs. As soon as we can drive a forklift around the floor, it'll be very easy to move things around. Everything that I've moved there has been palletized, so every single thing can be moved with a pallet jack or with a forklift, which makes it very easy. If you do need to get to something, you can just move stuff around. It doesn't take more than one person, which is good. So that's been something we're trying to do, is not put stuff on the floor where it's hard to move again. Other questions?
Business activity.
Yeah, it's a business
Desks.
activity.
How is I gonna interrupt their desks? I guess.
Yeah, so there shouldn't really be. That's like one of the easiest things.
Right,
to
yeah,
provide, is just 120. Yeah, the other one nobody's asked about the internet.
Right.
We're just gonna transfer our charter service over there for
How am I
now.
gonna do my live stream next month?
Exactly. And then we'll figure that out as we go. But yeah, there's enough square footage and enough space here that essentially for now we're just going to put the business incubator on the east side of the building where all the windows are. And then we'll, as we build that into an event space and then sort out what we're doing upstairs, we can move people around. But for now, it's just everything's going to be on one floor just like it is now. Should be right. Yes, Mr. Tim, you get to move all your own junk. Your stuff's heavy.
Yeah. How big are the incubator spaces?
It'll be the same thing. They're basically 7 foot by 7 foot. I might shrink them down to 6.5 for you. And no metal allowed. There'll be no shelves and no steel.
Per cubic foot though, they're getting a lot more for that stuff.
Exactly. You
Go
get
up,
14
man,
foot
go
now.
up. Are you gonna have some upstairs and some downstairs?
We'll get there, but for now everything's got to be on one floor. There's no stairs right now, intentionally. So yeah, I guess I could forklift you up there. You should just build you a big pallet.
I just wanna be a.
So no, yeah, like I said, everything's gonna be on one floor. Well, there's plenty of room. We'll figure that stuff out as we go. The incubator folks are probably honestly gonna move last because that's the easiest thing. It's all office stuff. Anybody can grab it and move it. The thing I'm most concerned about is getting some service type stuff figured out initially. Like we have another car lift, so we'll set up another car lift over there, get that working before I take this one apart, and we'll move this one over as well. Some stuff like that. That there's specific things that really need to be around for people to be able to get stuff done. So we'll sort through that as we get there. So barring any unforeseen things, the April 1st should be fine. Obviously, now towards the end of the month here, I need a lot of help moving everything. But so far, I've got a fairly good system down. Essentially, we just palletize everything in huge boxes, which is what all the plywood and the pallets are for up front. Stuff a box completely full, we roll it up in the trailer. I can move somewhere between 4 and 6 pallets and a go on that. The only thing we really need is we're going to need a truck with reasonable weight capacity so that I can forklift something into the back of it and then move it. That's one problem with our trailer is that you can't forklift something directly into it. They can carry 10,000 pounds, but I have no way of getting it up besides using the ramp. So that's something that we'll figure out who's got a huge truck that'll let us borrow it for a day. And we can forklift like the mills and lathes and stuff like that onto the truck and then drive them over there and unload them. But right now we gotta wait till the floor finishes setting up. So I can't move anything heavy until after Thursday basically, and even then we have to be careful. The concrete is still curing, and you can gouge it fairly easily until it sets up. And so that's what we're waiting on, is that the concrete finishes setting up so we don't destroy the floor right away. Findorf guys said we can destroy the floor, but not until after they leave. So, anything else anybody's worried about? Curious about? I guess the most important, yeah, Mark.
How big was the crew?
How big was the? Oh yeah, for the port. So they did the whole floor with 11 people. One of which was the boss. So we won't say whether he was doing a lot of work or not, but he's the guy holding the pole of the laser. So playing a critical role, making sure it's flat. What's interesting is they did the best they could flattening it with the screed, and then the way that it gets so flat is by running the hovercraft looking thing just over and over and over and over and over again. And on average, it's just averaging at all the particles. The floor is really flat. You can set a cart down, it'll just start rolling in a random direction if it's going to roll. It'll either stay there or it's just going to go some direction because it's got no preference on which way it wants to go. The drains work very well as well, so that's been pretty cool, at least so far. We won't know until after the pipes truly fill whether, it's really draining anywhere, but as far as we know, the water is going down somewhere, so we haven't tested it beyond that. At some point, we'll figure that out. Other than that, yeah, it's very exciting. We have a lot of space. It looks really, really nice with the floor. And really, we just need to get the drywall started out so we can do the insulation. That's an easy deliverable anybody can help with. Moving is the same thing if anyone wants to help. I generally, if I'm either here moving things or I'm over there doing whatever I need to do. There's occasional paperwork days, which is what today was, trying to just coordinate, make sure I have materials and stuff arriving when we need them. But essentially we have everything in stock, either at Menards or Home Depot, ready to go for the drywall and the insulation to get that done. And that's really the next big one. That's very well in our control. The other big important one is the electrical, and like I said, it's kind of right now riding on MG&E getting scheduled and going from there. But it seems like it's something they can get done before the end of the month, so it seems feasible anyway. The HVAC stuff's the same way. We really just need to get the unit hung and hooked up to electrical, and then it'll run and work and heat. But with the 2 heaters that we have currently, we can certainly keep the building plenty warm. Even if you leave the garage door open the entire day, both giant garage doors open the entire day, it drops down to about 50 and it doesn't stop. It just stops going down because we've now got about 2 million pounds of concrete in the building, which means now that they're hot, they're going to stay hot for a long time. You really have to leave everything open for a long time for it to cool off that much. So it's been kind of fun to see the dynamics on all that stuff too. Alright, so otherwise if you have other concerns or questions, come and ask me. It doesn't matter. We're just doing everything we can to make sure we get it done on time and get out of here before this turns into a pile of rubble. We do own a Bobcat, and if this building's getting torn down anyways, we might be able to take turns chipping away the corners or something. We'll see.
Yeah, lottery off some excavator demolition.
Might be a lottery off some excavator demolition. I don't know who's going to do the demo work yet. There's a couple of demo companies that have been pretty friendly to us as we've been in other buildings taking stuff down. But yeah, I don't know what an excavator hour costs, but we could find out. Might be fun. Yeah, we'll be taking the lights and other stuff out of here. We're going to take down the heater from here and put it upstairs in the other building just to temper the air up there, heat and cool that, and kind of go from there. So we'll be figuring this stuff out kind of as we go. But it looks like we've got a feasible process to get where we need to be then. I don't think anybody else. I know Heather's got something to talk about at the very end. So without further ado, Jim, you want to get the lights on again? And Brian? What's that? What's that? Oh, you have a project to present?
Yes.
Where were you going to ask earlier? Alright, come on up. Never mind, Brian's got one. Yeah, probably a long, boring one. It's going to be great. I think so. This thing. Man, oh man.
Yeah, I do the live stream too. So what happens is I'm in the other room making sure the live stream goes. It's on a 1 minute delay. So when Chris says, is there anything left to do? I don't know until a minute after it's happened. Alright. So this device here, I'm working with another member of the sector. It's called a Clinostat. She used to work at a genetics department, for the genetics department on campus, and what they do there is genetic sequence stuff and try to figure out what genes apply to what behavior, right? So this is, so just like there's laboratory white mouse that's been genetically sequenced that everyone knows what those lab mice are. There's a similar plant that's sort of in the plant world. And this is what they use to, try to decipher what gene sequences do what behavior. So I'll pass this around.
Just don't open it. Don't open it.
Yeah, it's gonna grow and kill you like a blob. So they're having some issues like building a machine that basically negates the effect of gravity. So what this device does is over time, gravity is basically a vector of pushing down, right? So if you could over time average it out to be 0, so gravity's like hitting this thing down this way. By the time it gets down the other way, gravity is undoing that action over certain revolutions per minute. So really, how I describe this to people is just a very precise, slow motion rotisserie. But it was made out of a lot of different things here around the sector. So in this case, we have a basket that has 6 of those little trays that hold those little seeds and plants inside of there. And that was just the requirement they came up with. So we kind of started with, okay, that's kind of our payload we got to rotate around. And we use this 3D printed or this laser cut box that I created years ago where I can dynamically make it any size I want. So we're like, okay, 6 trays, here's our box, put it in, air's got to pass through, light's got to pass through because they're plants. Plants need light and air to grow. The goo that's in that tray is a growth medium, so that's kind of the soil, so to speak. And then from there, we were able to sort of build this device out of stuff we found around here. So in this case, the box is made of a laser cutter around here. There's 2 bearings in here that are sort of 3D printed holders. From that, it spins off of this just metal or aluminum square rod that you get from Menards. 3D printed this belt pulley that goes to a motor. 3D printed a case which has a bunch of electronics in it, basically an Arduino and stepper motor controller. And then the main structure of this rig is this stuff called the 8020 that I found in the metal shop. So it's kind of a combination of 3D printing stuff, laser cutting stuff, programming electronics to make a device to do this genetics project. So it's a lot of different things pulled together, and it'll probably be a month and a half until we work on the second version of this. So this is the first version. The second version, they approved the design. We'll be getting new elements for it, but depending on what part of sector gets moved, depends on what part we work on. Because if I can't use the metal shop because it's over there, the 3D printers are gone, the laser cutter, I don't know what to do. So,
Brian's just established a new game. I'll try to stay one step ahead of whatever he needs. And
I don't.
I used to work in genetics.
Yep.
And for example, we had a machine that was just a disc with holes in it that went around about that speed.
Yep.
It sold for $900.
All right. Okay.
So you've got something there.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the issue was they have a couple different things they kludge together, but this needs to run reliably for a few days, right? It's a plant-based thing, right? So they need to run it for at least, the spec was like a week, so I was able to just run this for a week to make sure it didn't fall off the rails or something weird like that. But yeah, I don't know. We sort of put together a pricing diagram. So this is kind of based off of like early 3D printers where it's like, okay, here's a spreadsheet of all the parts. This is the websites where we've got all the parts. We're hoping to make the instructions, the 3D printed parts. This is going to be even easier. We found some stuff with Adafruit, so you don't have to really solder together sort of the motor controller, so you should just be able to buy the components minimally, solder some stuff together, hook up some wires, flash the Arduino, know, maybe laser cut the box. Hopefully it's minimal, but yeah, there's a market for it, I guess. I don't know. So, it's good. It's good. Yes, Sean.
The rotation, was that specified by the sizes?
They want several different rotations. So there is an interface, so you can see it goes faster. So this is revolutions per minute. So yeah, they want to do it at different revolutions. You know, there are some talks about, you know, they're trying to negate action. So they're trying to, you know, make it move faster and slower depending on whatever their hypothesis is. So we're going to be making 2 of these devices. So I guess the idea is one's a control, one's everything else, and then they'll also have 2 for spare parts. If one breaks, they can use it again.
I mean, is this ultimately to mimic lack of gravity for space?
Mimic lack of gravity, yes. Yeah, so like if you ever like Google Clinostats, there's like 2-dimensional ones and 3-dimensional ones. So this is a 2-dimensional one, and there's another one where like this whole apparatus will then spin around this way too. And then I've seen ones where like that whole thing is then spinning around. You know, right? It's the effect. It's trying to negate the effect of gravity over time. Yeah.
Using the recorder or voltage feedback to figure out what I'm getting.
So I'm using a stepper motor. So it's a timing-based thing.
And you're just going, that's good enough for.
Right. That is the question. I brought that up with my partner because she talked about, well, there is some research done with these plants that said the position of the moon can affect particular behavior. So I was like, well, technically, since I'm not using a real-time clock, just using the chip on the Arduino, this really could just be 0.9997 revolutions per minute instead of exactly 1. So it's like, I know that this is a small variant. If it's an issue, let me know. So yeah, I've made that known, and if they have an issue, they'll let me know.
Any other questions?
What steps are involved in what? In testing it? So I did sort of a long-term just burnout test. As far as genetics, I mean, we showed it to the team. They seemed to like how it works. They said it works better than the machines they have right now. So I think it's really going to be the next step of actually getting the 2 devices, putting them in their environment, and as long as they can switch it out and manipulate it the way they want to. You know, it sounds complicated, but I think they just need a thing that spins around reliably. That sounds dumb, but sometimes that's the problem to solve it.
What's the plant?
Arakiba, I don't know. Someone told me.
Arabidopsis.
That's the Wisconsin fast plant.
No.
No, it's just a little bitty. It doesn't grow here and all that.
Yeah, apparently it's like a very small seed. It's like incredibly small, and the 2nd generation makes lots of seeds. Am I correct about that?
It's the White
Yeah,
Mouse
it's
of the
just a
plant
nice,
world.
easy plant to work with.
Right. Yeah.
It's weedy.
Yeah, nothing fun.
It doesn't grow here, but it's escaped from so many labs.
Invasive. Invasive and dead. What's the movie where the thing falls from the earth from?
All movies.
Andromeda. Is that right? Yes. It's that point. It will kill you. Alright, anything else? Alright. Thanks for your time.
Alright, anybody else say anything? Yes. Oh, you're gonna, really? Yeah. Awesome. Let's hear it.
Alright, so this is just kind of a pitch for, just to see what kind of help we can get. I don't know how well it's going to do with the move coming up the next month. But about a month ago, I was out delivering pizzas and my car was stolen. There have been a rash of car robberies over in Madison the last couple of months, I'm sure you've heard. And they've got it narrowed down to 5 kids, ages 12 to 16, that live on the southwest side, that are going out and stealing 2 to 3 cars a night. Mostly crimes of opportunity. Unfortunately, I gave them that opportunity when I was delivering the last pizza of my shift. I was no more than like 25 feet away from my car. The car was not out of my sight for more than 10 seconds, and 2 kids hopped in it and took off. I ran up the road, and there was a plow truck that was plowing out one of the parking lots, and opened up his door, and I was like, "The fuckers just stole my car. Can we chase them?" And he's like, "Hop in." And so at that point, I was feeling pretty good. Like, okay, all we gotta do is follow them until they stop, and call the cops. While we were chasing them, I told him that if he gets the opportunity, put it in a ditch. I just want to get my hands on him. He says, no, I know what to do. And as soon as he was able to catch up to him, he gets directly on the left-hand side of the vehicle and starts honking the horn. I have no idea what that was supposed to do, other than alert them to us chasing them, which means they're not going to stop. So as soon as he did that, they weren't stopping at any stop signs, stop lights, anything. They floored it. We chased it for a couple more minutes, and then we ended up losing when they hopped back on the bell line around Southtown. So my plan is, because when your car is stolen, it sucks. And especially for me, it's a silver Toyota Camry. I had it for less than 2 months before they stole it. And I didn't send out an email because I didn't want anybody else to get in any accidents or anything while rubbernecking on the road, because about every minute you travel on East or West Washington, you see about 12 to 15 Camrys. Trust me, I know, because for 2 weeks I was watching for every Camry everywhere I went. But these kids that are doing this are pretty much fearless. I mean, every car they get away with, it just empowers them more to go out and do it again. The cops can't even do a bait car, because according to the DA, that's entrapment. I call bullshit. I said, well, you guys can't do one, how about me? Can I do one? And he's like, what do you got in mind? I don't think the tasers in the seats are gonna work. I wanted to just sterilize them right there, for future generations. So I watched a couple highlights of the bait car show on YouTube, and I don't know how they can get away with it without it being entrapment. And they get away with some pretty dangerous things. The main worry is public safety. They don't want the vehicle to be able to run once they get in it. So I like to do something where, set up a decent looking car, and as soon as they get in it and try and engage the transmission, it automatically kills the engine and locks the doors, keeping them in there. I want to, aside from taser seats, I was thinking taser door handles. And I've got a solution for that too. Everybody said that would be too much, but I've got a game. I don't know if any of you have seen this. I took it to my family's Christmas. It didn't really work out as well as I thought. But it was still fun though. Basically, I mean, it's just plastic handles, and 4 people grab it, and when the lights and music stops, you hit the button. Last one to hit the button gets a shock. There's high and low on here. And there's also a function where you can do 3 out of the 4 get shocked. If you guys want to play it, go right ahead. I think it's hilarious as to who can stand the pain and who can't. Because it more or less just tingles, but it's a very shocking tingle. So I figured, hey, why not I just wear one of those in his door handle? But Jim said that we could use some of his GoPros to hide cameras in the vehicle. And I talked to the detective about this because there's a whole task force just on car thefts, because, like I said, it's 5 kids that are stealing 80% of the cars in town right now. Yeah, and considering that I think halfway through February there was something like 87 cars stolen. And in most cases, like mine, I guess because we chased them, they decided to ditch the vehicle rather quickly. But it still took me 2 weeks and 7 hours to find my vehicle. I couldn't rely upon the police to find my vehicle because they're not looking for a Toyota Camry. Although every cop I did stop and talk to, they were able to pull up my license plate and be like, silver Camry, right? Like immediately, like before I could even finish, like, hey, have you heard about it? Like, yeah. And so I was impressed by that, but there's only one police car that's actually rigged up with a sensor on the right above the driver's side and the passenger side, that as they're driving through traffic or anywhere, even parking lots, it's reading license plates. It's automatically catching them and running through a database. But that's only one vehicle that has the funding for that. Coincidentally, I found that vehicle parked in front of a garage while I was doing paperwork. Yeah, I went out every night for like 2 weeks. I got to thank Jesse and Mark let me borrow his truck a couple nights. Went out with, I had, he let me use the second truck to run some errands. So, yeah, basically I was out of work and unable to get any source of income for 2 weeks while I was looking for my car, which was ditched shortly after they took it that night. I found it 3 blocks away from the West Side Police Station. 3 blocks away! So when I found it, I called the cops right away, and they showed up, and we went and checked it out. And what they stole versus what was left is absolutely baffling. They're the worst criminals ever. But what they did take was my snow scraper. I still don't know why they took my snow scraper. I love that snow scraper. All my iPhone charging cords. My backpack was in the car. Thank God it was the one day that I left my laptop at home. They left my iPad in there, but they had shut that off right away because when I found it 2 weeks later and turned it on, it was still 100% charged. So they at least were smart enough to try and avoid getting tracked, which it's only a Wi-Fi, so we wouldn't have been able to track them anyway, but you can't tell that by the outside. So they took all my iPhone charging cables, a corrupted iPod Nano, and my GPS and the key that was in the vehicle, which also had the remote unlock for my car. Now, unfortunately, I found out my car does not have the chip keys, so they still have a working key and a way to unlock my vehicle, and they also took my GPS, so they have satellite directions right to my house if they ever want to take it again. So until I get my ignition rekeyed, which is going to cost, I think, about $40 to get that, but they can still get in my car and take whatever they want from it. But the stuff they left in the vehicle was kind of retarded too. There was an iPad Air in the back seat with a cracked screen that they left. They left the fidget spinners. They played with them because one of them was in the back seat. So, but yeah, grateful that I got my car back. Still sucks that it puts me half a month behind on everything. So I still want to catch these little shits. Every time they get away with a car, they're just more empowered to do it again. And they're going to keep doing it, and their crowd or their group of friends that are taking them out and driving them around every night, which in most cases I guess they use their stolen cars from previous nights to go out and look for new cars to steal. And best I can see is that they're just doing it for the thrill. That's probably their biggest ambition behind it, because I'm sure that's a great high, getting away with something like that. But you don't fuck with someone's car. So I want to do a bait car where we trap them inside, and as soon as the doors are locked and taser handles engaged, I want an audio message from Jigsaw to start playing on the stereo. And then we're going to have a fog machine in the trunk that'll start dispensing smoke out of the air conditioning vents. Recording everything. Because there is one thing every teenager fears more than anything, and that's humiliation amongst your peers. So I figure I could ride the ad revenue on YouTube from posting that shit up for a couple of years, and that'll, offer me some little solace to contend. So, and who's in? Anybody? Show hands. You're just scratching your head. You were all for this, man.
The name's not on it.
Yeah, and like I said, I talked to the detective about it, and he actually got way more excited than I thought he was going to get. Like, I thought it was going to be, don't do this, that's a horrible idea, you're going to get yourself killed. And, no, but he took the opposite route and was like, I love it. He's like, I think it's great. He's like, I can't do anything like that, officially on the books, but he's like, if you got something in the works,
So how do they know it's just 5 or 6 kids doing all this?
They've caught some of them. They've
what do they do with
they've caught them already, and the court system says, no, let's give them another chance.
Oh, right.
Which is bullshit. I mean, if it's if you're joyriding, Jesse for one. Where's Jesse? Jesse here? Okay. Jesse's a former car thief. Okay, let's just get this out there. When he was in high school, he'd go and joyride cars, but I also got him into working on cars too. But yeah, the cops have caught some of these kids, and the hard part is catching them red-handed. I mean, the time it takes to jump in a vehicle, take off with it, and I mean, you're gone. In a matter of 2 minutes, you can be out of the area and disappear with it. So like I said, I mean, it's just empowering every time they get away with it. So I want to make it so that they get PTSD shivers every time they get in a vehicle from this point on. So yeah, it's basically, you know, I mean, if you saw, or you know, if there was a video of you on YouTube, but if you trying to steal a car and end up shitting your pants because of what happens after that, I highly doubt you're going to continue that as a daily line of work. Yeah.
What kind of cars are they targeting? Is it drivers because the car's been running? Or
See, I think
is it a car that
see, now I actually, on a delivery that after I got my car back and was back on the road, I ended up taking a delivery to a former delivery driver for Falbo's. He said he worked at Falbo's about like 15 or 20 years ago, and he had his car stolen while he was indulging in a customer supplied tip late at night with some customers, and his car disappeared, and he said he reported it, and I guess he found it 3 days later parked on like 3 blocks away. Like so some drunks just
by the customer's boyfriend?
no. It was just somebody stumbling home from the bar, didn't want to walk another 3 blocks or something, and just took it and parked it on the road, and he found it a couple days later.
Are they actually breaking into cars?
No, and that's the thing. It's all kinds of opportunity. It's all when people are either warming their cars up. I mean, these kids, these fuckers stole a car with a baby in it. The woman was warming up her car, had the baby in it. She ran back in the house to grab something, comes back out and sees the car taking off down the road. Now they stopped a block away, set the baby in the road, and took off with the car. Exactly.
That's better.
They don't deserve to live in a free society anymore.
They can still get charged with kidnapping.
Yeah, at that point, but they don't, you know, there's no description to provide. They're smart enough to avoid cars with OnStar. So you've got to find something that, you know, create something that's appealing enough to steal, but not new enough to potentially have any sort of tracking system in it.
And then leave it running.
Yeah. So, I mean, with being that there's 5 kids there, I mean, these 5 kids, these are the ones who are actually jumping out of the cars and jumping into the running vehicles and taking off.
But if there's only that many kids, you're going to have to drive around town and leave your car running for months before they'll find it.
This is a man who spent 2 weeks looking for his car. I don't know. I might have the right guy here.
Trust me, I know all the shitty parts of town to leave a car running. I drove through all of them many times during that 2 weeks. Yeah, Mark.
2 questions. This is, I think, it's more general.
Yes, they're going to survive.
Can you see from police reports where cars are stolen? So is there data out there for
That's
that?
something I wanted to discuss.
Can you see how many of them get them back? So out of those 80 cars,
Okay,
how many
well,
were returned?
I know the national average of cars stolen versus those that get returned to the owners is something like 42%. Now, victims of theft that end up having like no sort of recourse ever or even getting their stuff back is something like, they said that, this is not just car thefts, but any sort of theft, it's something like 19% get something back, like get either the thieves caught or their property returned. So this is like the car thefts the rashes that have been going on the last couple of months. I don't see it stopping anytime soon because their group is ever expanding. It was, you know, some officers tell me that it was, you know, 20 to 30 kids that are friends with them that are driving them around, and then I've heard upwards of 50. So, and it all started as an idea between a handful of kids at one of the middle schools, I think it was Jefferson Middle School or something like that, where they can actually trace it back to like the lunchroom conversation that started it all. Like, they just thought it'd be fun to go and steal cars and then just hide them around on the southwest side, because that's where they're hiding and ditching most of them, is off of Raymond Road or the Maple Grove PD area. So they're within walking distance, so they can just find whatever key they need and go to whatever vehicle might still be there where they left it, and then take off again with it, and then they keep shuffling them around like a shell game.
Alright.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Live
You can-
streaming this,
We are.
wouldn't that be enough deterrent maybe?
No,
So,
they're not the smartest criminals. Like I said, they left thousands of dollars worth of tangible items that they could have taken with in my vehicle. So,
alright, thank you, Aaron.
yeah.
Maybe wants to plug him? So, Tom will start, but we'll just go around. You can say who you are, what you're interested in, otherwise, and you're welcome to just stick around and hear Aaron's war stories driving around in circles.
Play the game.
Or you can try playing the game.
Hi, I'm Tom. I do woodworking.
Hi, I'm Steve. I do like small embedded projects and 3D printing stuff.
I'm Chuck Colley. I volunteer with the Wisconsin Science Museum.
Jeremy, the Raspberry Pis.
Bob, consumer electronics and IoT stuff.
I'm Peter. I build electric controllers.
I'm John. I build models and make noise, drive parts.
I'm Jean. I came with my husband John.
I'm Devin. I'm the designer.
I'm Don. I'm working on my, continuing to work on my telegraph project. We're putting the 19th and 21st century communication together.
I'm Jim. I'm doing a lot of sewing projects.
I'm Tim. I'm a metal worker.
I'm Doug. I do some radio.
I'm Carlson, I'm not a member of FTC joining and for obsolete electronics. I'm hosting an antique radio society meeting April 22nd, 3610 Lexington Avenue.
I'm Mark. I'm an aspiring schlepper.
Inspiring, huh? I'm Davi, I'm a member, I like programming in Python and playing Go.
I'm Heather Stephen. I'm here to promote Mass Maker Fair. Do you want to do that now or?
Go for it.
All right. Well, let's take a minute. I want to see that project.
And that was great too. Yeah, we can take it to the maker fairs and be like, hey, come on, Jack, my ride.
May 12th is the day this year, and well, first, congratulations on your new space. That's pretty awesome, and I look forward to seeing it. And you guys have always been really great about participating in the sector group, which we hope you'll do again. I've got these little things which I don't think made it to the front here. We're trying to diversify a little bit how people get learned at Maker Fair. So booths is traditionally how people do it, but we've got a presenter stage this year. We've got a demo tent, and we also have workshops. And I'd really like to amp up the tech and electronics at the fair. I feel like that's a little weaker right now, although, hey, we still got a month before the applications all come in, right? Our deadline's March 31st or May 1st, whichever. We take them late. So anyway, I would love to hear from you all. Please let me know if this is something of interest. Stage presentations are just really like this. It's like, you know, if you have PowerPoint, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. Demo is a hands-on thing. And workshops with CAP participants, it's kind of like a making thing. So those are the varying ways that we're doing things. So hope to hear from you. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I'll leave a few of these behind. So thanks.
I'm Aaron, and I deliver pizzas, and now I get some part-time fishing.
Sean, how about you go?
Christine, the designer. I'm Caroline, I'm a cartographer.
I'm John, a longtime member of Sector, and mostly I do welding and things out of steel.
I'm Keenan, 3D printing hobbyist, but these days I get more than my fill at my day job at Midwest Prototype.
Awesome. Thank you for coming, and like I said, if you have other questions about the building or if you have some time to help, let me know. And yeah, always stick around and hang out with our folks and try to get tased by Aaron's game.
Yes, you got